G'day there and welcome to the Christian Women in Business podcast show. It's so great to have you here today listening from wherever you are. I hope that if you are in lockdown that hopefully you have been released and freed now. Hopefully Sydney is as well, because I don't even know what week we're in now of Sydney lockdown, but it's been nearly 2 months, which has been crazy. So if you're listening from Sydney, I hope that you're holding in there. I hope that you're not going completely crazy. And if you have kids, then you are surviving. We have a beautiful lady on the podcast today. Her biggest mission to her business is bringing hope to the broken, hurting heart. And her favorite thing to do on the weekend is to hike, bike and go to the lake, which sounds absolutely delightful. Welcome to the show, Beverley Shoemaker.
Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate this. And as you were talking about that you're in lockdown, you know, I'm here in Texas and we're not in a lockdown right now. So I feel for you. I really do.
And whereabouts in Texas are you? I
am outside of Fort Worth.
Okay.
Which is west of Dallas.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So if you're west, that would be quite far inland. But it would still get hot there, does it? Or
oh my goodness, yes, we've been hitting 100s, high 90s, so it is.
Oh.
It is pretty hot.
Yeah, that's in Fahrenheit, people, not in Celsius. Just in case you're freaking out, thinking, "Gosh, 100 degrees."
They're burning up.
Yeah. Cool. So you run the Resilient Heart podcast, and I'm sure that's not where you started. So I would love for you, if you could please share with myself and the audience, I guess, your life story of how you kind of got to having the Resilient Heart podcast and bringing hope to a broken, hurting heart.
Well, I would love to share that. So I spent most of my life in the world. I didn't come to know Christ at a young age. I'm not old. Let me just say that. I'm not old, but you know, I always believed I was a Christian and I went to church. You know, I went to church, then I was in the world for a while, and then I, you know, came back to church. But I just want to say this, and I'm setting this up because when I go into my story, you'll understand. But I actually, you know, would go to church on Sunday, participate, pray, but maybe go to a Bible study here and there, but that would be the extent of it. So I would leave church on Sunday and, you know, go about my life through the rest of the week, and with no intimacy in knowing who Jesus was. I have two children. One of them is was in the Army Special Forces. He was, you know, what they call a Green Beret, and he was a Halo, jumped out of airplanes at 25,000 some feet plus in the air, and crazy boy, but like his mama, you know, we're adrenaline junkies. But so you know, he enlisted and went into the military and was deploying, and he enlisted in 2001, and then we had 9/11 happen, and then the war
then
was right after that.
Iraq. Is that the ones you're meaning?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he kind of went right into that. So then I was faced with my son deploying to war. And really, it was so bad, you know, around 2003, 2004, we were losing a lot of our military. And it really was starting to shake me up because he would be gone and I would just hear the news. And I got to the point where I finally had to turn the news off because it was kind of making me crazy. Anyway, his second deployment home from Iraq, he came home. He had actually been blown up in a Humvee, but he came home. And my younger son, Nicholas, lived in Ohio. I was living in Colorado at the time. And so we had kind of a family reunion, rah. Oh my gosh, he made it home. He's, you know, healthy. He didn't, you know, get severely injured. And we had such a beautiful time together, the three of us, because we were spread out all over the place. And so just went, you know, after that week, I went back to Colorado, and it was 4 days after I got home, I received the phone call that no parent ever wants to get.
Oh, no.
And as I answered the phone that night, my youngest son's best friend was on the other end of the phone, and he was just frantic. And he was saying that Nick had been in this horrible car crash, and he was in the intensive care. He was in the emergency room at the hospital there.
Oh, my gosh.
So my heart literally just failed me because
Yeah.
here I am, like just, going through that with the military. And I get on the phone with a nurse, and I worked in healthcare. I actually am a respiratory therapist. Nobody knew what we were until COVID hit, right? Now I can tell people, hey, I'm a respiratory therapist. And they're like, okay, I know who you are, before they'd be like, what's that?
Yeah.
So as I got on the phone with the nurse, and she shared with me the extent of what was going on with my son, and she realized that I understood and I knew. They basically told me he had a massive head injury and they didn't expect him to make it through the night.
Wow.
So
here you were threatened about your son in Iraq, and he gets home safe, and then it was almost like you didn't have to worry about the other son, and then something so big happened.
Right. Totally threw me off guard. Well, and I couldn't get to Ohio until the next morning because there were no flights leaving that night. And so worst night of my life, like worst
night of your life. Yeah, I got it.
I got tongue tied there. And, because there's your child and he's 19, you can't get to him. And not knowing, they didn't expect him to make it through the night, but he did. And I made it there. I got his brother, he got on a plane and flew back in, and we were there the next day. And we spent the next 5 days in the hospital with my son fighting for his life. And on the 5th day, they came to me and my son, and they said, he's clinically brain dead. He's, and having the medical knowledge I did, I knew, and, and I was involved in everything that was going on with his care. And I knew at that point in time that, he was gone, and not just from that, but the Holy Spirit really prepared me for what was to happen. And it's kind of, people might think I'm kind of crazy, but those that may work in healthcare I would always say I worked in critical care. I loved critical care. I was in the ERs, I was in the ICUs, and I would always know when the spirit left the body. And, it's just maybe a strange thing for me to say, but I just knew. And so I knew that as well with my son, and, on the 5th day. So he passed on the 5th day. We had to, sign the paperwork, and he wanted to be an organ donor. So we had to go through the process of all that because, he was such a loving, giving child, and he just was all about life and helping other people. And when he got his driver's license, that was the one thing he had said to me that, hey, if anything ever happens to me, Mom, I want to be an organ donor. So it was interesting that we had that conversation. So I had to try to go back to my life, pick up the pieces. Couldn't work in the hospital system anymore. Couldn't work in intensive care. I didn't understand it at the time, but I had really been traumatized by it. So when I tried to go back to work and something came through the door that was so close to my loss, I would just fall apart.
Yeah.
And not realizing, and the word PTSD is so huge out there now, but at that time, no, I didn't realize that, that was what I was walking in, having panic attacks, anxiety, all this crazy stuff. So totally turned my world upside down, and had a hard time just getting back to life. And any of those mamas out there that have lost a child, they understand what I'm talking about. It is just the hardest, most difficult journey that one has to make. And to try to, it's like, I guess, the best way for me to say it is, first, you feel like your heart's been ripped apart out of your chest and shredded in a million different pieces. But also, if you take a jigsaw puzzle and you're trying to put the puzzle together, and you know what, you're missing a piece, you can't get the puzzle back together. It'll never go back together. There will always be that big hole. So I continued to try to pull my life back together. My marriage, we started struggling when you have that deep of a grief, things just happen, and hard to go forward when God is not the center of your life, and God was not the center of our lives like that time I shared. But this was when God started pulling me in, because I had another mother that came to me and said, listen, Bev, if you get in the Word, you know what, I promise you God's going to bring you through this. So I started to do that. I started seeking God with everything I had in me. And 3 years after this, I came home from work and couldn't find my husband anywhere. called the police. They came out, searched my property. About 8 hours later, they brought search dogs out, and they ended up finding my husband, and he chose to end his life by suicide.
Oh my gosh. Oh gosh.
This is deep, I know.
No, it's okay. I just can't believe how much you've gone through already.
Yeah. And that's what I said. At that, I was like, I hit the floor, and I was really literally crying, why God, why,
Yeah,
and,
of course.
And one of the detectives that was there, he just sat there with me, and he said, Bev, his father had made the same choice. And he said, you're never going to get your whys answered. You're never going to get your whys answered. And you know what? I don't. I still to this day, this was in 2007, and still to this day, I don't have my whys answered. But God started me on a path immediately to just go into ministry, to go into serving others. Amazingly, I was put in the path of an evangelist, and he became a mentor for me. And I started ministering in the military, and I started sharing my story. And when he had me come in and start to share a story, at first I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this. It was so hard. I couldn't even get 2 words out. But when these guys and gals would come up to me and say, I was in this place, I was ready to do this, but I didn't think about what it would do to my wife. I didn't think what it would do to my children, and it would shift their focus. So the days and the months, went on, and God was using me more and more. I was going to military bases, going to churches, just schools, going into schools, because obviously suicide is a huge problem. It's a huge problem in our nation. With our kids and with COVID, it's just loss of hope is getting more and more prevalent out there. So I was doing all this speaking. Interesting, we decided to sell our house in Colorado, and we were going to move to Florida. So we put our house up for sale, and it sold right away. And then a week later, COVID hit. We were just blindsided. We didn't know. And I'm going,
stupid
okay,
COVID.
where? And we couldn't go look for a house. We couldn't get to Florida. We couldn't look for a house. And here we are. We have to sell our house. I kept telling my realtor, I'm not doing this. I'm going to sit down. I'm not doing this. You can't make me go. And God, and all his amazingness, he shows up, and it just seems like it's always about faith. It's always about faith. This has just been kind of the story of my life. Sell everything, go to California to work for this ministry, for one man to get saved while we're out there. It's just crazy stuff. But 2 weeks before we had to be out of our house in Colorado, this house in Texas opened up. So God brought us to Texas.
Yeah, right.
And so here I am in COVID, and I'm like, okay, I don't know a soul here where we moved. No family, no friends, nothing. So this is how the podcast was birthed. Just out of coming, and it's like, what am I going to do with all this? I have, I'm used to the phone ringing. I'm used to being booked to speak. All of that shut down, that everything just shut down. No churches, no nothing. And so that is exactly how I came to create this podcast. And I just want to share hope. Like I said, to the brokenhearted. I want people to understand that no matter what you're going through, nothing is too big that God can't handle for you. And he's there if you just get in the word and you seek him out.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. After all that, one, you've kept your faith. And not only have you kept your faith, you got deeper, and then you've been able to inspire so many others around the globe, like with your voice now, and of course in all those schools and in the military. And I know in Australia, there are many force women and men out there who work in the forces that, have done the same thing. And it's been really hard for families, or, a broken marriage has happened at home while they were away, and it's just a really tough gig. So bringing that light of life to those people and giving them a different perspective is just priceless. So what date did you actually start your podcast? When was it launched?
It was launched last June, last June, I launched it. I had no idea what I was doing. And so this is where I want to encourage people because, and I'm the kind of person that I can't let anything beat me. So I am self-taught in technology, the computer, just anything that is, I sit down and I have to figure it out. I have to figure out how to make it work and I have to learn it. And I will sit at the computer. My husband I've remarried, by the way. And I'll joke sometimes, this is probably not a joke, but I'll say, he wasn't raised from the dead. I've remarried, but a wonderful, godly man. And God knew exactly what I needed. I have to just say that in that, the first several years of our marriage was just horrible because he walked into all my trauma, my unhealed heart, and was just, God sent him into my life to walk alongside me and help me and help me grow in my walk with Christ. So he was behind me. He's always pushing me. He's my cheerleader. You got to do this, but he'll always joke and say, you will sit there for 10 hours if that's what it takes to figure it out. You will never let it beat you. And so that's when I stepped into this. And I'm like, I don't know how to do a podcast. I've never done one. I don't know anything about it.
I think that's awesome. So can you share with our audience now 5 tips on your craft, please?
And so with that being the podcast, I guess, I'm a speaker and I'm a podcaster. So the first thing that I would say is show up, just show up. Because, when Jesus sent the disciples out, he said, go. And he said, don't worry about this. Don't worry about that. Just go. And that's what I guess my biggest number one would be, if you're feeling called to this, don't let fear Satan is the enemy. He's always wanting to come against us. And if he doesn't, will do everything he can to stop what God has put a calling on your life. So go, do it. Don't worry about what other people think. I would just say courage, courage it's really the only thing that is rewarded in our lifetime is courage. And I like to think of, we all know the story of David and the courage he had with Goliath and how he just walked right up and told that enemy what he was going to do. Goliath was out there taunting the Israelites, right? And David shows up and like, who is this talking about my God? And he just said, no, this is what I'm going to do. So I would say, have the courage to show up and fight back against whatever lies the enemy is trying to put in your mind to say, no, I can't. You just really have to really have to just step out and do that. Give of all of yourself, just give, completely surrender. And because people, I feel like, and I don't know, Sarah, with you too, but I think people, they kind of can see if somebody's passionate about it, if their heart's really in it. You can hear that in a voice, or if it's a video podcast, you can see it. You can see it in body language. So I would say jump in there and give everything you have with it and get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because it was so hard for me when I first did this podcast. I was sitting there talking to a screen, and I'm used to, maybe being in auditoriums or big churches and 1,000 people out there. That didn't scare me. And I'm looking like, how do I talk to a screen?
Yeah, that's right. It's just me, myself, and my mic. It's very weird.
I actually had to end up taking a picture. I pulled up my iPad and put a picture of a whole bunch of military guys standing there. And I was looking at that picture when I was talking, because it helped me to get past this, looking at this screen. It's crazy, but it worked.
Yeah.
And so whatever you have to do to make that work, because, at first when you start out, it's not an easy thing to, like you said, be myself and a mic. Build trust with your audience, build trust, because and I don't know how you feel, but trust is really an issue these days. I mean,
it is.
We don't know what to believe is truth anymore.
Yeah.
And so, I would say build that trust, always speak in truth, speak from a place of credibility. That is huge for me. That's where I feel like with the military and the schools, when I would go in and speak and I would share about suicide prevention or drinking and driving, I'm speaking from a place of credibility. I get it. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to be on that other side of everything. And I know what it's like to be in that darkness and want to leave as well. And lastly, I would say God, it says in the word to do everything with excellence. Do as unto you're working for the Lord, and do it with excellence. And we need to be the salt and light of this world and keep charging forward.
That's awesome. So just to recap, we have number one, show up. So when Jesus sent his disciples out, he said, just go and don't worry about the rest. So Jesus has you, go and do it and don't worry about what other people think. Number two is have courage, just like the courage of David. Know that you've got the power of God on your side. So you literally are unstoppable. Number three, give all of yourself to God and give everything you have to the mission. Number four is build trust with your audience, always speak in truth and from a place of credibility. And number five, do everything with excellence, which I think is really important. And I think if you do stuff with excellence and you do share from like truth and from a place of credibility, that naturally builds up the trust for people to get you and kind of understand. So can you share with us now, you've mentioned about God in your story and how you kind of delved into your relationship with him more, but how is it that you incorporate God into your podcast, into your business?
Well, God is the center. God, and so he's already incorporated in it. Everything comes up out of that, because honestly, I say this so much. Jesus pulled me up out of that pit. He pulled me out of that pit of darkness. And my mission is to glorify him. My message is to live out the Great Commission. So I don't fear, or shrink back in sharing the gospel. That's what it is. That's what healed me. That's my story. And I'm sticking to it.
That's cool. So can you share with us next your Bible verse for this season and why?
So I have this in the Passion Translation, and this is actually really recently that this came to me. It's my life. It's Psalm 31:15. In the Passion Translation, my life, every moment, my destiny, it's all in your hands. And that's just the first part of that verse. But I've been in a wilderness season since we came here, and just really fighting through that wilderness season. And I think at one point I just quit. I laid so many things down, and I trying so hard to do, I think, works, if that's the best way for me to say it, or try to make things happen. And I think God has just brought me here, and this is what he basically spoke to me. He said, you know what, Bev, your life, every moment of your life is his destiny. So it's all in his hands. Everything is in his hands. I can't do it. If he calls me to do it, I can respond and I can go, but I learned that I have to trust God. Once again, I have to trust that his plan is so much more perfect than what I could ever imagine.
That's awesome. And it totally is. We call that working in the grace rather than the grind. So staying in your grace zone, knowing that God has you, and trying not to force things, but just trying to keep yourself in that grace zone, because life is a lot, especially business, is a lot less effort, and you'll not waste your time on things that are not going to work if you stay in that grace zone. So well, thank you so much for sharing your incredible story. I know that there will be listeners out there today who will have gone, oh my gosh, I can totally relate to you. Maybe they've lost a loved one through suicide, or they've lost a child. These are real things that happen, and I don't know why, but we don't talk about it. Oh, I know that it hurts to talk about it. I don't mean it in that sense, but we think that we have to deal with this stuff on our own, and we really don't. Whether we're in business, whether in leadership, it doesn't matter. Like, something like this affects us all. And I just want to thank you for your bravery, for sharing it with people, and not being scared and not bowing down to the fear, but using it to free people. It's really courageous, and good on you for doing it.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, this is not anything that I would have, had chosen as a child, or how they always say, "Oh, what did you, what were your dreams? What did you want to be when you grew up?" And I was a chatty Cathy, but I was also the girl in the back of the room going, "I hope the teacher doesn't call on me. I don't want to stand in front of the class." I would be so embarrassed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. So where can our listeners find your podcast?
Okay, so it's on all the platforms. It's on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's on iHeart. Just go down the list. But my website also, you can find them on my website, and it is theresilientheartpodcast.com.
And of course, we'll pop all that on the show notes too. So if you've related to Beverly and any of her stories, or you want to listen to her podcast, we'll have all the links on there for you as well. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Beverly. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with our audience today before we end the call?
And as we head into another season, I just want to encourage people, don't lose your hope. Don't lose your hope. Trust God. He's here. He's in it with us. He's got a plan way bigger than we could ever understand. So hang on to that, because he's right there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. Well, you're listening to the Christian Women in Business podcast show, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much, Beverly.
Thank you.
The Christian Women in Business podcast is proudly supported by the Administration Agency, administrationagency.com.au.